People in the upscale restaurant had grown used to the quiet presence of Maya Thompson, the soft-spoken black waitress who moved through the dining room with the calm precision of someone who had learned to survive in places she wasn't always welcomed. But on that particular evening, all eyes shifted the moment a well-known billionaire stepped inside, dripping in confidence, entitlement, and something far colder. He spotted Maya instantly. Something about her simplicity amused him, and he decided to make her the target of his arrogance. He asked her for financial advice, not because he needed it, but because he wanted to mock her, to make the room laugh at her expense. What he didn't know was that Maya wasn't who he thought she was, and what she was about to say would flip the entire night upside down, exposing truths he had spent years hiding. Watch until the end. Wait a second. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories just like this one. Before that night, Maya lived a life most people in the glittering neighborhood never noticed. She rented a small apartment a few miles away in a community where people stitched together multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. To outsiders, she looked like just another waitress working long shifts, offering polite smiles to customers who rarely remembered her face. But those who knew her, really knew her, understood she carried a quiet brilliance. She read financial journals on her lunch breaks, studied late into the night, and had dreams that stretched far beyond the worn-out apron tied around her waist. Maya had fallen into the restaurant job after a series of setbacks that began with her mother's illness. Every plan she had once mapped out had been disrupted by medical bills, caregiving, and the weight of responsibilities no young woman should have to bear alone. Yet she never complained. She showed up every day, steady, composed, and determined not to let life turn her bitter. But the restaurant wasn't always kind to her. She dealt with customers who made assumptions about her intelligence, her background, and her worth. She endured comments disguised as jokes, conversations paused when she walked by, and glances that reminded her she didn't belong in that shiny space. Still, she moved through each day with resilience. That evening was supposed to be like any other. Another shift, another mix of polite orders and quiet endurance. Until the billionaire walked in, until the room changed, until Maya felt the familiar tension in her chest. The one that warned her that someone powerful was about to test the limits of her patience, her dignity, and her strength. The billionaire, Leonard Drake, was the kind of man who wore wealth like armor, the kind who believed the world existed to serve him. He slid into the private corner booth without asking, stretching out like he owned the air itself. His entourage followed behind him, loud and eager to impress. Conversations across the restaurant, softened eyes drifting toward the spectacle of his arrival. Maya approached with her usual professionalism, though her instincts prickled. She had seen men like him, men who treated service workers like props in their own performance. She steadied her breath, ready to do her job and leave him to his night. But Leonard had other plans. He barely glanced at the menu. Instead, he scanned Maya from head to toe, a smirk rising as if he had discovered his evening entertainment. So he said, tapping his fingers on the table, "You look like someone who gives great financial advice." His entourage chuckled. The tone was unmistakable, the mocking edge, the theatrically raised brow. Maya knew exactly what he meant. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a setup for a joke, a waitress, a black woman serving tables in a restaurant he frequented. Someone he believed stood at the bottom of society's ladder. The room listened. Maya felt dozens of eyes pressing on her. She could almost hear the silent question. Would she laugh along? Would she swallow the insult? Would she shrink? Her heartbeat quickened, but her voice stayed steady as she asked, "Is there something specific you'd like to know?" Sir Leonard leaned back. "Yeah, if you were me, a billionaire, what would you do with your money?" His grin widened. "By a few lottery tickets. Maybe splurge on a new apron." More laughter from his table. Even a few customers at nearby seats let out uncomfortable snickers. Maya held her ground. She wasn't new to humiliation, but something about Leonard's tone, the calculated cruelty, the superiority masked as humor, cut deeper. It reminded her of interview rooms where she was dismissed before she even sat down, offices where her credentials were questioned, spaces where brilliance was overlooked because it came in a body like hers. Leonard continued, "Come on, educate me. What's your expert opinion?" He expected her to break, to look down, to retreat into silence. But instead, Maya looked him directly in the eyes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't match his arrogance. She simply said, "Are you asking for real advice or just trying to embarrass someone who can't fight back?" Ripple moved through the restaurant. Leonard's smile faltered, but only for a second. His pride flared, embarrassed. He scoffed. "No, no. I'm giving you an opportunity to speak. Isn't that generous?" The words hit her harder than the laughter. Giving you an opportunity, as if her voice only mattered when someone like him allowed it. Maya felt something shifting inside her, not anger, but clarity. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what she had studied, what she had survived, or what she was capable of, but he was about to learn, because this time she wasn't going to swallow the disrespect. She wasn't going to let his money decide her value. The room leaned in, waiting for her response. Maya steadied herself, her mind racing with every quiet sacrifice she had made to reach this point. In her life, she thought of her mother's exhaustion, the countless nights she spent tutoring neighborhood kids, and the financial reports she studied in the dim light of her small apartment. She thought of every time someone had underestimated her, belittled her, spoken over her. And she realized that this moment, the billionaire's mockery, the audience watching, the tension thick as stone, was her line in the sand. She inhaled slowly, then she spoke. "I had your wealth," she said evenly. "I'd start by fixing the mistakes you made on your last investment." Report gasps, chairs shifted. Even Leonard blinked. She continued, unwavering. "The retail chain you acquired last quarter, its operating costs have been hemorrhaging for months because your team didn't analyze the community demographics. You bought stores in neighborhoods that don't match your consumer base. The data was there. You ignored it." Leonard's entourage froze. "How do you know that?" he asked, voice cracking. "I study financial markets," Maya replied, "every day on my breaks, after my shifts, whenever I can." She glanced around the room. "'Cause I don't get opportunities handed to me. I make them." Silence flooded the restaurant. Leonard, suddenly exposed, stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not as a waitress, not as entertainment, but as someone who understood more about his empire than many of his own advisors. Maya leaned in just slightly. "You asked for advice," she said. "Here it is. Stop underestimating people simply because they don't look like wealth." The room erupted, not in laughter, but in stunned, breathless disbelief. Billionaire sat frozen, stripped of the arrogance he wore like a crown. His entourage avoided eye contact, suddenly unsure of themselves. Around the restaurant, people whispered, some in shock, others in admiration. Maya didn't linger in the spotlight. She didn't need to. Her truth hung in the air long after she stepped away from the table. Ennard called her back, his tone quieter, now almost unrecognizable, but Maya didn't flinch. She stood tall, carrying the dignity carved through years of resilience. He tried to apologize, stumbling over words he wasn't used to saying, but Maya simply nodded and returned to her work. She didn't need validation from someone who had built his confidence on the backs of others. Word of the encounter spread beyond the restaurant. Regular customers asked for Maya by name. Management upgraded her role, and within weeks, a local financial firm, having heard about the remarkable waitress who corrected a billionaire, asked her to interview. They didn't see her as a stereotype or a service worker beneath their attention. They saw brilliance where others had chosen not to look. Maya moved forward, not because of Leonard's humiliation, but because she refused to let anyone define her worth. The moment became a lesson whispered across social feeds. Never underestimate someone because of their race, their job, or the uniform they wear. Genius doesn't always walk in with a suit. Sometimes it carries plates and keeps its head down until the world is ready to listen in. For everyone watching, the question lingered: how many brilliant voices have been silenced by prejudice before they ever had the chance to speak? Which country and city are you watching from? Take care.